He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
I genuinely felt bad for him. I watched him deliver his best punchline. I mean, he put all the energy into it he possibly could. And when he finished his punchline, he started to laugh himself and he looked at the room and not one person in the room was laughing. In fact, as I scanned the room, I kind of looked around and realized either it went way over their head or they just didn't care about his funny. His funny didn't work with this audience. That's kind of what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and we're in our 90-day series focused on story power. And part of story power is being able to deliver, whether it's a joke or it's a punchline or it's the point. Remember Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy and Steve Martin? That little scene, yes, those are not pillows, but the one where he says, look, if you feel like it's necessary to share one of these little anecdotes, one of these little stories, do me a favor. Have a point. It makes it so much more pleasurable for the listener. There's a lot of people, and you've probably been in their audiences. You probably watch them on Zoom calls or webinars, sales pitches, and other presentations, where they drone on forever about their own life, their own experiences. I own this ranch, and I have this kind of car, and I have these kids. And after 25 or 30 minutes of telling their quote-unquote backstory, or like they're some kind of superhero, their origin story, when they're done talking, you feel like, okay, we got nothing in common. Thanks for telling me all that, but can we go now? I've been in seminars that had several speakers up before lunchtime, and then as soon as lunchtime came, nobody came back. Because they, quote, saved the best for the last, or they want to offer the punchline in the sales pitch after lunch at the end of the day after you've heard enough content to make a decision. The problem was the people they chose to speak before lunch were so boring, nobody cared. They didn't have anything to offer. But here was the bigger thing. There's 2 really important things that really only can be determined by you as the communicator. Now, I don't care if you're running a webinar or a seminar and you're hoping to sell at the end, or you're leading a team into battle, or you're leading a product team into new product development and innovation, or you're leading a sales team into a new territory. In every one of those instances, your ability to communicate with them makes all the difference in the world. And you're the only one who can choose the stories that you use to bring together this team. The points that you make, the ideas that you embed, the emotions that you tickle in order to build this camaraderie, to find rapport. All of it comes from the stories you tell. Now, I know. You've heard, well, your story sells. Well, for some people it does. I've said this over and over and over again. There are a lot of people who have been in tragic situations where the tragedy itself, the trauma itself, is like a made-for-lifetime movie. And people want to see it, and they want to hear the details, and whether it's a morbid curiosity or it's a fascination with the faith of overcoming or whatever it is, that story is incredible. But then there are people who are just everyday Joes and Janes, just normal people getting through life. And yeah, they've faced some difficulties and they've overcome some obstacles, and they're fascinating people to talk to, and they love the public. And and they're great communicators, but the story that they tell isn't like being bitten by a shark or climbing Mount Everest in your underwear. It's just not that kind of story. And so those are 1 in a million stories, and they're great stories, but not everybody has one. And when you do have one of those 1 in a million stories, guess how many people in an audience can relate to you? 1 out of every million people you talk to. Which means if you're converting clients, 1 in a million, that means you've got to talk to 1 million people to get 1 new client. That makes you some influencer. That's some critical story. But if you've got the kind of story that people live through every day, and you can relate that story as a pain problem, and that you found a solution to, well, now you got something going. Here's the real question, though. Can you select the story that you're going to tell with these 2 key factors in mind? Does it relate, and does it resonate? If you look out into the audience and you realize, well, I thought I was coming here to speak to a bunch of mothers of preschoolers. Turns out I got a bunch of old dudes. I thought I was going to have all of these conversations about diaper changes and early morning feedings and cereal all over the floor at 2 o'clock in the morning with no explanation. And that conversation isn't going to make any sense to these people that are sitting in my audience now. If it dawns on you that the story you plan to tell and the audience in front of you don't match, as sad as it is to say, you're about half a mile down the road ahead of most communicators, because there's some really lazy communicators out there who genuinely believe if it's my story and I live through it, everybody ought to hear it. No, not everybody cares. Not everybody cares. Now, maybe you've heard the idea, well, you've got to niche down. You've got to only speak to your ideal client. There's some truth to that. I mean, honestly, it's great to admonish, encourage, build up, develop anybody who needs it. There's no reason that you wouldn't pour your life into others to make their life better if you have the ability to do it. If you have the ability to communicate and something to offer to everybody on earth, then bring it on, right? There's a time and a place for that. But if you want to keep the lights turned on, if you want to pay the bills, if you want to pay your car payment and your mortgage and your insurance, you're probably going to have some kind of profit mechanism on the backside of the story that you tell. Which means at some point you've got to both relate to and resonate with buyers of the solution that you offer. Now, whether you speak from the stage and you sell vitamin supplements, or you speak on a webinar and you sell information products, or you speak from the stage and you coach other people to do what they do better, doesn't matter. Maybe you just sell books. Maybe you're just a fascinating, entertaining speaker, and when you're done, they run to the back of the room and buy a box of books from you. Awesome. That's great. But in all of those cases, if the stories that you tell don't relate to the audience in front of you and resonate with them deeply, you're not going to motivate them to action. They're not going to buy anything from you. They're not going to trust you with the solution you offer, or the solution you claim to offer. Because sometimes even those are not the same. I would ask you, if we were live together, to raise your hand if you've ever been sold a bill of goods. You've had somebody say to you, I can do this and this and this and this and this. And when they're done and they put the list on the screen, you're like, wow, that's awesome. And 6 months after they've gotten your payment, you've gotten nothing in return. Nothing that they claimed are they capable of. Or even if they do it, they kind of do it, not so good. It's kind of a result. If you've been there, then you know it's because they're really slick salespeople, but maybe even they're just hucksters because they can't really deliver what they can promise. That means they've written a great speech, but there's no depth to it. That's what happens when people take the first half of this teaching that I'm giving you today and they try to cram it together with their sales skills. That is, find the story that relates to and resonates with the people in the chairs in front of you. Tell that story to win them over, to gain buy-in. But they missed the qualification that I gave you in the first 2 videos in this series. You've got to be original and you've got to be authentic. See, anybody can look in the audience in front of them and make up a story that seems to resonate with them. Here's the risk with that, though. If you think just because of the demographics, the visuals, the skin color, the way they dress, the part of town that you're in, that you understand their mindset, you could be sorely mistaken. You may be making some stereotypical presumptions that will cause not only your story to fall flat, but possibly offend someone, and most certainly destroy your own credibility if you haven't walked a mile in their shoes, or at least walked somewhere near their shoes. Then chances are you don't get it. I have a friend who's working on a campaign right now where everybody's in denial about the problem that he has identified. And people are like, no, that's not really happening. He's like, no, it's happening. They're like, no, it's not really happening. I mean, we've asked the authorities and they're like, no, it's not really happening. And so he took a film crew to the spot where the problem is happening, where 10 million people are suffering with the problem that's happening. People are like, no, it's not happening. It's like, you see the people? Do you hear their voices? Do you listen to the stories they're telling? I'm not making this stuff up. This is real life. It's really happening to people right here, right now. We have evidence. We have proof. We have names and numbers and dates. Okay, it's going to be really hard for anybody to say, nah, that's not really happening. Or to say, but you just don't really understand. He's like, no, I've been there with them. I've spent hours talking to them. I know what they're going through. I've heard it from their own mouth. I've lived with them for days at a time. I get it. I know you're in denial, but I get it. See, that's an entirely different thing than going, hey, y'all, look over there. I heard once about such and such a thing happening. See, I haven't been where my friend has been. I can help to spread the word about his story, but I won't go much further than that. I'll say, if you want to know, you need to talk to him because he's been there. He's interviewed these people. He's had conversations with them. He knows what the problem is that they're suffering with. That's a whole different thing. I can't tell that story with originality and authenticity because it's not my story. You follow me? See, there's a whole lot of people who can make up the evidence. They can pick up a book and read it. They can go online and find the story from online and read it from online, and that's awesome. And they might even be able to find the story that relates to a person who looks like, thinks like, buys like that, and cause that person to be motivated to action. In fact, now with all the tools like AI, you could steal a transcript from a video like this and try to use that technique and say, hey, chat, find me a story that resonates with an audience that looks like this, 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 and this, and does this, this, and this, and this, so that I can motivate them to buy my product. And you might get away with it for a season. But I can tell you, like a lot of people that I've run into who seem to be great presenters from the stage, but they're a mile wide and half an inch deep. Once you get past the facade of their great presentation, they have nothing to offer. They can't deliver on the promise because they don't even remember what the promise was. They memorized a script. They delivered a story. They let old chat boy write up a script for them to read from the teleprompter. It has no meaning to them. It means nothing to them. I watched my mother live the majority of her life after my stepfather died. She was divorced when I was 4 and widowed when I was 9 and lived the rest of her life as a single mom. I watched that relationship with her friends, with family, transform over time. I've never lost my spouse. I can talk about what it means to be an observer, to be a participant as the child of a mom, of a widow. But I can't tell you what it means to feel like a widow on the inside. So if I were to stand up in front of a crowd and say, I know what it means to be a widow, I would be lying. I would be inauthentic. That would not be original. Now, the people in the audience might be able to match some of the emotions if I were to say, my cat died, and it's kind of like that. In fact, recently we heard a very public figure talking to people who lost everything in a wildfire say, I know how you feel because my house almost burned one time when my kitchen caught fire. I nearly lost my wife and my cat, who weren't even home at the time. But it was tragic. I understand your trauma. No, my friend, you don't. When you watch everything you own go up in flames. Oh, I did watch my mother run over our cat. My personal story. Run over our cat and kill it in the driveway, trying to get the van out of the garage because our house was on fire when I was about 12. I watched the fire trucks come up and soak our house. It was really ironic. The little electronic radio that caused the fire, my Bible was laying on top of it. That Bible came out unscathed. I still have it somewhere with the burnt edges, but you can still read every page of it. It was laying on top of the radio that started the fire. I was sitting in the living room watching TV with the family, and I saw what looked like clouds rolling across the top of the ceiling, and I thought, that's really bizarre. That's weird. I've never seen that before. And then I ignored it for a while, and then I saw it again, and then I ignored it a while, and then I saw it again, and then when I pointed it out, my sister turned, and she was sitting at an angle where she could see my bedroom, and she saw the flames, and she's like, oh my God, the house is on fire. And we all ran out the door, and as my mom was backing out, she ran over the family cat. Killed it dead. True story. Lived through it. I have all the emotions that go along with it. I have all the real facts that go along with it. I have all the history that goes along with it. I recall all of that. Why? Because it's my story. Now, if you've ever been in a house fire at 12 years old, and you know what it's like to think, well, I'm going to run in the room and grab my most important things, you don't do that. Now that I've been a firefighter, I know why you don't do that. Because fire moves a whole lot faster than you think, and it is a whole lot more unpredictable than you think, unless you've studied fire science and you know how it's going to behave. It's a whole different ballgame. So why do I say all that? Well, because if I walked into a room full of people who have been victims of a fire, and I said to them, look, fire's not scary, it's cool. They might all look at me like I have three heads. They'd be looking at each other like, has this guy ever experienced a fire? Does he know what he's talking about? There's something wrong with him. That elevator doesn't go all the way to the top. And see, when you tell a story in front of an audience and you haven't asked yourself, what really is our common ground? What is it that I'm trying to motivate them to? How do I identify with them? Not just identify them, but identify with them. This is why I tell my coaching clients, I hope that you have 100 stories by the time we're done working together. In a 90-day session, I don't just want to teach you some stories. I will help you write scripts. I will help you write speeches. That is not my job, though. My job is not script writing or speech writing. My job is helping you to identify the story that's going to best benefit your audience. Who do you help and how? Once we get past that, we know the who that they are. What stories are you going to have in common with them? How are you going to help them? What solution are they looking for? How will you get that to them? What's your product delivery system? We'll work through all of those things together. And I will help you identify and tell the stories that you tell better. But I'm not ChatGPT. I don't make up stories. I don't create things out of thin air. I don't write scripts for people of stories that they've never lived through. Why? Because I don't believe stories that are made up that way are original or authentic. And stories that are not original or authentic are a mile wide and half an inch deep. Which means you got nothing when they go a little deeper. If you're talking about living through a house fire and somebody comes up to you and says, well, you know, I went through this and how did you overcome such and such? And you've never actually been in a house fire. You just thought it'd be a fascinating story because this is a group of firefighters. You got a whole different thing. I have a friend named Justina Page who lost family members in a house fire. She tried to rescue. She still has scars on her hands, on her face, on her body from trying to rescue her family in a house fire. My family all walked out. In the end, only one room of our family house burned. They put it out in a matter of minutes, even though it was just a local volunteer fire department. My story is not nearly as tragic as Justina Page's story. Her story will rock your world. And I know other people who've lost loved ones in a fire. That's a whole different story. For me to stand on the platform and say, hey, listen, I know what a house fire is like. Well, I do, but only to a certain extent. And that's where that mile wide and half an inch deep comes in. I mean, I know what the experience is like to discover your house is on fire and to run outside and to lose your family cat in the process, but I didn't lose a loved one in that fire. And so if somebody came to me and said, my house burned too and I lost my spouse or my child, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I can't relate now. We've gone further than my depth. And if I'm not clear in telling that story, I may align with an audience member who's now brokenhearted because my depth can't keep up. I got nothing to offer at that point. If you are a leader and you're using stories to communicate, which I highly recommend, if you're a leader and you communicate and you don't use stories, you're missing a lot. But if you're a leader and you use stories to communicate and you don't choose those stories wisely, then you won't relate and resonate with their audience in front of you. What is the real point of resonating and relating with the audience in front of you? Let me be really clear on this. Resonating with the audience in front of you isn't just about getting buy-in. It's not just about moving the needle on their choices and their options so that they choose you to do whatever it is, to follow you, to buy into your ideas, to innovate with you, to buy your product, whatever it is. That's not the only purpose of resonating. See, resonating happens, building rapport happens when people realize that you are alike. Not like we want to go hang out and have a beer together, but we have common ground. What does common ground look like? Here's some key words for you. And these are the ones that are going to mess you up because these are not demographic. These are psychographic and philosophical. And believe it or not, most people, even though the media would love you to believe that skin color is the number one thing and that one particular race or one other race is better than the other in education or in sports or in academics or in politics or in finance, it's hogwash. It's a lie. It's a straight up lie. It's a straight up lie. Now, psychographically, that's a whole different ballgame. What you believe and why. I heard someone say just recently, and I love the quote, more people are limited by their beliefs than by their potential. Ooh, let that one settle in for a minute. It's what you believe about you. It's what you believe about the world. It's what you believe about the people around you. That's what limits you or opens up opportunity for you. It's not your potential. It's your belief. Because most people believe a lot less than their potential. If on a scale of 1 to 10, your potential is a 10, but you believe a 2, you're going to perform like a 2. All the time, every time. See, that psychographic aspect of who you are, that philosophical aspect of who you are, there's a lot more resonance there than there is in skin color, income, education, geographic boundaries, nationalities, sexual identity, gender identity. When you can take all of those silly labels and set them aside and you can focus on what do you believe about you? And you can find the story that helps people to realize that you've got some common ground in your core values. You've got some common ground in your belief systems. You've got some common ground in your philosophical way of looking at the world. That common ground, that builds a deep level of rapport. Not a mile wide and an inch deep, but deep rapport, because you got a whole lot more to talk about when you walk off the stage than where did you grow up, where did you go to school, what kind of education do you have? Oh, you didn't graduate from Harvard, sorry. No, it goes way deeper than that. Those things that you hold dear, like family, family values, belief about who you are and where you came from, what you're here to do. When those things become the common ground that you share, because the story that you tell relates to and resonates with the core values of the audience in front of you, now you have a whole different relationship with them. When you walk off the stage, you're endeared to them. You have longevity with them. You have depth with them. And they don't just trust you that what you said from the platform, what you said from the stage, what you said at the front of the room, what you said on the webinar is original and authentic. They believe that if you've discovered a new idea, a new solution, that they can trust you with it. My friends, you can't make that up. You can't chat GPT your way out of a story that is authentic and original and tells people, I've been there. I've been close enough to smell the fire. I know what that smells like. When you've been that close to the reality that they're living in, the pain that they're going through, and you found a solution that draws you out of that pain and into a better life, it's not your potential that they're looking at. It's your belief. And when you can transfer that belief to them, that your solution will work for them as well, because the story you told includes them. It looks like them. It feels like them. They're like, you get it. You've been where I am. I can sense it. I can feel it. I can hear it in your voice. I've shared those emotions. When the story you tell is selected well enough because the audience in front of you resonates with it, now you can build buy-in. Now you can build rapport. Now people trust you. Don't try to do that by making up stories. Don't try to do that by matching demographics and psychographics to a story that you haven't lived through. Don't steal somebody else's story to try to make yourself fit with an audience. That doesn't build credibility. And in the end, it'll come back to bite you. I promise. You'll be worse than the jokester whose punchlines fall flat because they don't realize that something they said actually offended the people they're talking to. You can't build long-term relationships like that. You might win the day. You might get the laugh. You might get the paycheck for the day. But long-term, your referrals were going to be terrible. I challenge you to tell the story that resonates with the audience because it's original and it's authentic. It looks like them. The characters in the story look like them, think like them, talk like them, value what they value. Then your story will change lives. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.